Welcome to White Shadow Fare, where today we're making white sandwich bread. You don't have to proof your yeast, but I find that it's useful to make sure that my yeast is ready to go before I start any recipe. So once you see those bubbles, you know that you're ready to move on to your next step. Now to the yeast mixture, you are going to add 3 tablespoons of a solid shortening, or you could even do 3 tablespoons of butter if that's what you'd prefer. You're also going to add 3 tablespoons of honey. Add a tablespoon of salt, and 6 to 6.5 cups of bread flour or all-purpose flour are needed. Now, for anybody that hasn't baked a loaf of bread before, this simply means that you are going to add the flour until your loaf is no longer sticky. Once the dough is no longer sticking to the sides of my mixer, I know it's time to stop adding flour. Each time I make it, it might vary just a little bit. The one thing you don't want to do is add too much flour so that your bread is so stiff and so dry that it can't rise properly. Once you're done kneading your dough, you're going to place that in a bowl and cover that bowl and let it sit for 45 minutes to an hour until it rises and it more than doubles. So as you can see right here, I have a nice fluffy dough. There's a lot of activity in this. And so I'm ready to move on to knocking out some of the air. You don't want to get it completely flat though. A lot of people think that you need to get every bubble out of it, and that's not what you need to do. So you're going to slowly release it from your bowl. And this is large enough to make 2 nice size loaves of bread. Now I used 9x5 baking pans, but you could certainly use any loaf pan that you had and it would turn out perfectly. Now I'm a bit obsessive about making sure that both of my loaves weigh the exact same amount. So I'm just weighing the dough here, dividing it out, and making sure that both loaves come out to the exact same amount so that when I put it in, I know that each loaf is equal in size. Now, if the loaves not being the exact same size isn't important to you, don't worry about it, just eyeball it, and they will still be beautiful loaves of bread. Now I decided to make a white sandwich bread because I've been making nothing but wheat breads for several months now and sourdough breads, which are delicious and wonderful, but my granddaughter really prefers to eat white bread. Of course, who doesn't like homemade bread? And so we were having sandwiches and I decided I would make this kind of as a special treat for her. And ever since I made this loaf of bread, she's been asking for it over and over again. Now, once you get your loaves formed and in your pans, you are going to cover them with something like a light tea towel and let them rise. And it shouldn't take any more than 30 minutes to an hour tops, even on a cold day. And it should be risen up about an inch over the top of your pan. So as you look at the pan from the side, you should see that the dough is doming over the top no more than an inch high. You don't want to overproof your bread. I'm certainly not a professional bread baker, but I like to kind of flatten the dough out. There's no reason for this other than I don't really want it super domed in the center and narrow at the ends. I want it as equal as possible. So you handle this any way that you see fit. Cover it up with that tea towel and let it sit somewhere quietly undisturbed for at least a half an hour. Now it's time to go in the oven, and you can see the nice rise that I have on my dough. And here it is when it comes out of the oven. It's a beautiful looking loaf. I did put a little bit of butter on the top of one of the loaves to make it a little softer. And my family found that they preferred that to the loaf that didn't have the butter on it. And as you can see, it came out nice and golden in color. The crumb on the inside of this is absolutely beautiful. And it is such a delicious tasting loaf of bread. And that little bit of shortening that I put in this loaf of bread, or if you choose to use butter, is going to make it last longer than a normal loaf of bread. So if you didn't have that additive in there, your bread would go stale much quicker. And here you can see the crumb shot. It looks very beautiful and it is nice and soft the way that you want bread to be. I hope you give this white sandwich bread a try. It is absolutely delicious. There is nothing wrong with having white bread every once in a while. Anyone lucky enough to eat this will enjoy this tasty, soft bread.